If we want some insight into when this actually gets called, what we can do is set a breakpoint here. Now, in previous videos, we've used a debugger called xdebug in order to stop the execution of PHP at a certain point and look at a call stack. This is exactly what we're doing here. You could do a very similar thing by using the function debug backtrace in PHP and var dump, but the debugger makes it easier to look at what's going on here, and it's not too hard to set it up with PHP Storm. So I'm going to set the breakpoint, and I'm going to set to listen for a connection in PHP Storm here. And then I'm going to jump to the browser and I'm going to turn on debugging here. And I'm just going to go to the home page of our Drupal 8 site. So I'll clear out everything in the path besides just the base slash and hit enter. PHP Storm asks you to accept the connection. I'll accept it. And so we get a stop here in the get accept header matcher service, which is where we set our breakpoint. So if we look down here in the debugger, this gives us a stack of everything that was executed to lead us up to this point. So this is the line that we're on right now. And if we click on the next line, we can see what executed this. It's container get. You can see that it's in container.php, and this is the get method inside of the container class. And that this was actually called by the same thing, container get. And if we continue to go up this stack, you'd see that there's a lot of this get going on. This is because we're getting a service that's used by another service, that's probably used by another service, and so on. So now if we go back up to this first call to get, what I would expect is that Drupal would be looking for whether this instance existed or not, and if it didn't, it would create it. So this is the creation part. This is where the service is actually getting created. But the next time that Drupal wants this service, I would expect it to try to find it somewhere else. And if we scroll up just a little bit in this container.php file, even though all of this might not necessarily seem easy to wrap your mind around, you can see this comment right here that says reuse shared service instance if it exists. So what I'm going to do is set a breakpoint right at this line, and I'm also going to set a breakpoint where the service gets created initially. And inside of our dependency injection container, I'll remove the breakpoint. And so what I'm hoping to find out here is if we close out this debugging session and reopen our page in the browser, I would expect that a bunch of services would get created, but then at some point they'd start getting reloaded. And so I just wanted to see this in action. So what we'll do is close out this debugging session by hitting the stop button, and then I'm going to go back to the browser and refresh. Okay. So just as I expected the first time that this breaks, it's in the same line where we were looking at before, where the method gets created. You can see that the this, in this case, if we look at the variable down here, is an instance of service container prod, which is the class name for our dependency injection container. The method here, if we look down here, is get request stack service. So this function is defined somewhere inside of our dependency injection container class, just like get accept header matcher services. So we would be able to do a search and find that function. Okay, so we would expect that this function would get called now, and then it would never get called again. Now, if we continue to play through this debugging session to the next breakpoint, you'll see that it stops here again, but the method being called is a different one. And we can continue pressing play. I'm going to keep pressing play until we get something that's different. You can see the method change every time I press play. Okay, so here, now we're returning a services. Remember how I said that this services, when we were looking at the dependency injection container right here, was going to form the basis of how we get services? Well, it looks like that's what's happening here. The first time that this got called, it added a new item in the services array. And then when that item exists already, when we're in container.php, then it's going to return that item, this services, and then the ID. In this case, the ID is config storage.active. Now, if we wanted to just make sure that config storage active was created and then we reused it, we can stop this and play it again and look for the initial creation of this service. So let's just remember config.storage.active. I'll stop the debugging session. I'll jump back to the browser and refresh. Okay, and we're just going to look at this ID as we play through. I'm going to continue pressing play. Okay, here it is, config storage active. All right, so we shouldn't see that again until it gets reused. So let's click play again, play, nope, nope. Ah, there it is again. But this time we're returning the existing one. Okay, so this container.php, we can see the full namespace right here. It's actually part of the dependency injection component here inside of Symfony. This is where we're getting our services from. So we now know under the hood what's going on. I'm going to stop this debugging session.